In my 35 years on the bench in Providence, Rhode Island, I have had all kinds of people stand at my podium. Young people, old people, rich people, people who could barely afford the bus fare to get to the courthouse. I have had professors and plumbers, nurses and nightclub owners. But I want to tell you something, my friends. Subscribe right now because you are not going to believe who walked into my courtroom on a Thursday morning in November. And what happened after he got there left every single person in that room, including me, completely speechless. I am going to tell you everything. The way the room changed the moment he walked in. The moment I realized there was something much larger than a traffic citation happening at my podium. And I'm going to tell you what this man, this professional athlete who could have sent a lawyer, who could have paid the fine without blinking, who had absolutely no obligation to come stand in my courtroom himself, what he chose to do instead, because that choice said everything about who he really was beneath the jersey. Hit that like button right now if you believe that what a person does when they do not have to do the right thing is the truest measure of their character, because this story is entirely about that. It was a Thursday morning in November. The city was in full autumn mode. Gray skies, the smell of wood smoke drifting through the streets, that particular Providence quiet that settles in when the college students go home for the holidays and the city breathes out for a moment. I had been on the bench since 8. The morning had been steady, good people, manageable situations, the ordinary and extraordinary human drama that fills these rooms every single day. Inspector Quinn handed me the next file and gave me one of his looks, not the concerned look, the amused one. The one that means, Judge, you are going to want to pay attention to this next one. Quinn has been beside me through more mornings in this courthouse than either of us could count, and I have learned to read his expressions like a second language. I looked at the file. I looked up at him. He just straightened his jacket with a small smile and called the case. The courtroom doors opened and Darius Coleman walked in. Now I want to be careful here because I am not a man who is easily impressed by celebrity. My father worked in a factory. My mother raised 5 children in a house that was not large. The values I was raised on did not include being dazzled by fame or fortune, but I am also an honest man, and I will be honest with you. When a 6'4", 240-pound NFL linebacker walks into your courtroom, the room notices. There is simply no way around it. He was enormous. That is the first thing. The kind of physical presence that changes the geometry of a space. He was dressed simply. Dark jeans, a plain navy blue pullover, a pair of clean white sneakers, no entourage, no publicist, no attorney in a sharp suit walking alongside him, just Darius Coleman alone walking to my podium at a measured, respectful pace. Subscribe right now to this channel, my friends, because what I am about to describe is one of those mornings that reminds me exactly why I have given my life to this work. I looked at the citation, 2 speeding violations issued on Route 10 on separate dates 3 months apart, both for driving 32 miles per hour over the posted limit. Significant violations, not trivial, the kind of speeds that can end lives. I looked at the file and I looked at this young man, and I said what I always say when I want to understand what I'm actually dealing with. I asked him simply to tell me what had been going on. What I expected, and I am being honest with you, was the standard professional athlete response. I have been doing this long enough to know the patterns, the apologetic tone, the vague reference to a busy schedule, the carefully rehearsed contrition coached by someone who handles public relations. I was prepared for that. I was not going to be harsh about it, but I was prepared for it. Darius Coleman looked at me directly and said, "Your Honor, there's no excuse for the speeds I was traveling. I know that. I want to start by saying that clearly." I sat back slightly because that was not what I expected. He said, "I came here myself because I thought the least I owed this court was to stand here in person and be accountable. I could have handled this differently. I chose not to." I looked at him over my glasses. Something in his eyes told me I was dealing with something genuine. 35 years of reading people from this bench, and that quality of directness, unguarded, unhurried, not performing, it registers in a way that is very hard to fake. I asked him why. I asked him why a man in his position who absolutely had options had chosen to come stand in my courtroom on a Thursday morning in November, and that is when the morning changed completely. Before I tell you what he said, share this video right now with someone who needs to hear that accountability is not weakness, because what this young man told me next is something that has stayed with me ever since. He paused. Not the pause of someone stalling, the pause of someone deciding how much of the truth to tell, and then he told all of it. He said that the first speeding violation had happened on a night when he had received a call that his younger brother had been involved in a car accident on the other side of the city, that he had been terrified and driving too fast because fear had temporarily overridden his judgment. He said his brother had been fine, minor injuries, nothing serious, but that he was not proud of how he had driven, emergency or not, because the roads do not become safer because your fear is genuine. I thought about that formulation. The roads do not become safer because your fear is genuine. A 26-year-old man had just said something that contained more honest self-reflection than some people arrive at in a lifetime. I asked about the second violation. He was quiet for a moment, and then he said that the second one had no good explanation, that he had been late to a team commitment and had made a poor decision, that he owned it completely, that he was not going to construct a story around it because it did not deserve one. What am I going to do with you? I said it quietly, and I meant it the way I always mean it, not as a reprimand, but as the expression of a man who has been genuinely disarmed by someone's honesty. I asked him about his brother. How old was he? Darius said 19. I asked where he was now, and that is when the second layer of this story revealed itself, and I was not prepared for it at all. Hit that like button right now, my friends, because what Darius Coleman told me about his brother is the real heart of the story, and I need you to stay right here. He said his brother's name was Terrell, 19 years old, living in Cranston. He said Terrell had grown up the same way Darius had. Difficult neighborhood, single mother, not many resources, not many clear roads forward. He said the difference between them was that Darius had football, had a coach who saw something in him at 14 and invested time and belief, and that investment had changed the trajectory of his life. He said Terrell had not had the same thing come along at the right moment. He said Terrell had been making some choices lately that worried him. Nothing criminal, nothing like that, but the kind of choices that a 19-year-old makes when he is drifting and does not have a clear sense of what he is building toward. Darius said he had been trying to be present for his brother, to be the thing that had not quite been there for Terrell the way the football coach had been there for him. He said the night of the accident had scared him, not just because of the accident itself, but because of the road that he feared Terrell might be starting down. He said, I don't want to lose him, Your Honor. He's all I've got left of home. My throat tightened, hard. I thought of my own brother. I thought of what it means to carry the responsibility of being the one who made it out when someone you love is still finding their footing. I thought of my father, who used to say that the measure of a man who succeeds is not what he builds for himself, but what he reaches back to help build for others. I looked at Darius Coleman, this young man with his whole public life built around physical strength and competitive power, and I saw something that was not in any sports column or highlight reel. I saw a big brother who was terrified of failing the one person he felt most responsible to protect. I had to pause for a moment. I actually set down my pen and just sat with what he had said. Inspector Quinn was very still at his post. I did not look at him, but I felt it. The prosecutor, David Chen, had both hands flat on his table and was looking at them. The gallery, which had been buzzing quietly when Darius first walked in, was completely silent. Not the silence of a crowd watching a celebrity, the silence of people who had just heard something real. Before I tell you what I decided, subscribe right now to this channel, because the ruling I made and what happened immediately after it is something that nobody in that courtroom anticipated. Nobody. Let me tell you something, my friends. I have been doing this for 35 years, and every case that comes before me involves a calculation. The law is clear on one side of the scale. The human being in front of me is on the other. My job is not to ignore either side. My job is to hold both with equal seriousness and find the response that serves justice. Real justice, not just technical compliance. The violations were real. 32 miles per hour over the limit, twice. Those are not minor infractions. Those are the kinds of speeds that appear in accident reports, in memorial services, in the grief of families who were simply driving home. I do not minimize that. I cannot minimize that, and I would not if I could. The fine was going to stand, and I was going to say clearly why it had to stand, because the integrity of this court requires that I mean what I say, regardless of who is standing in front of me. But there was something else I could do. Something I'd done before in cases where I believed the person in front of me had more to give than a fine. I upheld both violations. The full fine, significant, appropriate to the severity. I looked at Darius and I told him that the fines reflected not punishment but responsibility, and that a man who had come in and spoken as honestly as he had that morning clearly understood the difference. Then I said, but I want to ask you something, and I want you to think carefully before you answer. He said, yes, Your Honor. I said, you told me about your brother Terrell. You told me about the coach who saw something in you at 14 and changed your life. Is there anything at all that you could do for the young men in this city who are 19 years old and drifting the way your brother is drifting right now? He looked at me, and something moved across his face that I will not forget. He said, yes, Your Honor. I've been thinking about that for a long time. He told me that he had been quietly, privately, not for publicity, not for brand management, working with a youth program in South Providence for the past year, going in on off days, talking to kids, not about football, about choices, about what it looks like to build something when the starting conditions are not in your favor. He said he had not spoken publicly about it because he did not want it to become a photo opportunity. He said the kids did not need a photo opportunity. They needed someone to show up consistently, which was different. Show up consistently. I turned that over in my mind and thought again of my father. Share this video right now, my friends. Share it with someone who is quietly doing good work in their community without seeking recognition, because that kind of invisible commitment is the foundation that everything decent is built upon. I told Darius that what he was doing mattered. Not as a mitigation, the fines were still the fines, but as a fact that deserved to be stated plainly in a room full of people. I told him that the city of Providence had given a great deal to a great many athletes over the years, and that what he was describing, going back, showing up, being consistent for kids who needed someone consistent, that was how a debt to a city gets repaid in the currency that actually counts. He nodded. His eyes were clear and steady. He said, "I learned that from my mother, Your Honor. She worked 2 jobs for 12 years and never once asked anyone to notice. I had to breathe through that one." I said, "She sounds like someone worth learning from." He smiled, the first real smile I'd seen from him since he walked in, not the public smile, the private one, the one reserved for something that actually reaches you. I told him, "You came in here today when you did not have to. You told the truth when an easier version was available to you. You paid attention to the right things. That is not nothing, that is everything. Take care of yourself, take care of Terrell, and keep showing up for those kids in South Providence." I said, "God bless you, son. I meant it with every fiber of who I am." The gallery did something I did not entirely expect. As Darius Coleman turned from the podium, someone started to clap, not the celebrity applause, not the noise of fans recognizing a famous face. This was different. This was the sound of people in a courtroom in Providence, Rhode Island, acknowledging a young man who had just demonstrated something they recognized and valued. It built for a few seconds, and I let it go. Some moments earn their acknowledgement. Tell me in the comments, my friends, what you would have done. Would you have been stricter? Would you have done something different? I genuinely want to know, because cases like this one live in the space between clear rules and complex humanity, and that space deserves to be examined honestly. After the session ended that morning, I sat in my chambers for a while. I thought about Darius Coleman, and I thought about Terrell, and I thought about the football coach at 14 who had seen something and chosen to invest in it. I thought about how many Dariuses there are in every city in this country who never get that coach at 14, and what that costs all of us in ways we never fully calculate. I thought about my own father who had been seen by someone at a crucial moment, a foreman at the textile mill who recognized his reliability and promoted him and treated him with dignity when dignity was not guaranteed. My father used to say that one person who believes in you at the right moment can change the entire direction of your life. He built his whole philosophy on that. About 2 months after that November morning, Inspector Quinn came to my chambers before session and set a printed article on my desk. It was from a Providence Journal reporter who had written a piece about a youth mentorship initiative that had quietly expanded in South Providence. The article did not use Darius's name prominently. He had apparently asked the reporter to focus on the program and the kids, not on him. But he was in a photograph near the bottom of the page, standing in a gym with a group of teenagers, not in a posed way, but the way you stand when you are in the middle of a real conversation and someone happens to take a picture. And standing beside him, in that photograph, was a younger man who looked enough like him that I recognized the resemblance immediately, Terrell. I sat with that photograph for a long time. I thought about what it had taken to get to that gym. I thought about the night Darius had driven too fast on Route 10 because he was terrified for his brother, and how that fear had eventually led him to a Providence courtroom, and how that courtroom had maybe, just maybe, said 1 or 2 things that mattered. Or maybe Darius Coleman had always been heading there. Maybe some people carry their direction inside them so deeply that the route is just the route, not the destination. Maybe the destination was always going to be that gym, that photograph, that younger brother standing beside him choosing something better. I prefer to think it was a little of both. If this story has stayed with you, if it has reached something in you about accountability, about brotherhood, about showing up when you do not have to, please subscribe to this channel and leave me a comment below. Tell me what it meant to you. Tell me about someone in your life who showed up quietly and consistently for someone who needed them. Those are the stories that make this work worth every single morning. You are a good person for caring about these things. You are a good person for being here. In a world full of noise and performance and carefully managed appearances, the fact that a story about an honest young man and a brother he loves can reach you, that tells me something real about who you are. God bless you. Take care of yourselves. Take care of the people in your life who are 19 and drifting and waiting for someone to believe in them at the right moment. And come back soon, because I promise you, with everything I have learned in 35 years on this bench, absolutely nothing could have prepared me for who walked through that courthouse door the very next morning.